an experiment incredible in its ambition, comparable to the construction of a Hadron Collider, or even the mythical Tower of Babel. An ultra-deep well on the Kola Peninsula was supposed to provide answers to many questions about our planet, its structure, and the laws of nature. After drilling 12 kilometers into the Earth, scientific engineers made several amazing discoveries and even more. It seems they got to the bottom of something that no living person should have seen or known. They might even have released something that changed our world forever. What actually happened back then in 1984 and what global catastrophes it entailed? Is it true that scientists were able to dig to the underworld? Why has this created a new wave of sectarianism around the world? And how the groans of millions of souls sound. In May 1970, in the north of the Murmansk region, 10 kilometers from the city of Zapolyarny, the drilling of the Kola superdeep well began. As expected, this was timed to coincide with the centenary of Lenin's birthday. Unlike other ultra-deep wells, S3 was drilled exclusively for scientific purposes and even organized a special geological exploration expedition. Soviet geologists pointed to the Baltic Shield, located on the Kola Peninsula. After all, it is there that rocks over 3 billion years old are closest to the surface. This project was part of the U.S. economic race, although by that time the enemy had already lost momentum. American efforts to drill ultra-deep wells on the ocean floor near the island of Maui in the Hawaiian island chain have failed. At that time, getting into the Kola superdeep well project was more difficult than flying into space. Hundreds of applicants filled out questionnaires, participated in tests, underwent strict medical examinations, and most of them were found unfit for such work. After much preparation, a staff of 300 people was finally formed. The conditions were also unprecedented. Each driller received a government apartment, and the monthly salary of an employee was in the region of 1,000 rubles, with an engineer's monthly salary of 148 rubles. By subscribing to SG3, each of the lucky ones was not only involved in something great, but I provided for myself from my loved ones for many years. The work was carried out continuously, but preparatory operations took a lot of time. One 8-hour shift was spent lowering the apparatus, one for drilling, and one for ascent. On average, 4 meters of rock were covered per day. The first stunning discoveries occurred at a depth of 3 kilometers. There they discovered a rock identical to that which had been mined by that time on the surface of the moon. With the help of Luno code alone. When they reached a depth of 5 kilometers, the temperature jumped to 220 degrees Celsius, against 150 predicted. By this time, accidents had become more frequent, as if nature itself was asking people to stop. It took scientists 4 years to drill a well to a depth of 7,263 meters. While nothing unusual was being done, the same installation was used as in oil and gas production. Then the well stood idle for a whole year. The installation was modified for turbine drilling. After the upgrade, it was possible to drill approximately 60 meters per month. Many expedition members began to have health problems, in particular panic attacks and heart attacks. Then very strange things began. At a depth of 8 kilometers, 14 fundamentally new species of microorganisms were discovered, although previously it was believed that there was no life there. At a depth of 10 kilometers, drillers discovered a gold concentration of 78 grams per ton. This is twice the norm for industrial development. Copper and nickel were also discovered, which turned out to be surprisingly easy to extract. One of the largest accidents happened at the Kola SG in September 1984. When the researchers reached a depth of 12 kilometers, the drill string broke. Locals warned geologists that the underground inhabitants had sent a final warning, but, of course, no one began to listen to the shamans. However, scientists were unable to resume drilling from the same point. There was a collapse ahead, so they had to start at a depth of 7 kilometers. The climax of the second drilling attempt was a powerful explosion that sounded deep in the well. It was only by luck that no one died, the entire shift had already risen to the surface by that time. At a depth of 12 kilometers 66 meters, the drill string suddenly got stuck. They tried to lift her to the surface, but it didn't work. They increased their efforts, but the column did not move. The instrument arrows suddenly showed a drop in weight. Unscrewing each section in turn, the scientists began to rise. However, the drill itself and several kilometers of pipes remained in the belly of the earth. A mystical story is associated with this incident, which was first published by the Finnish newspaper Aminasaastia. The journalists were allegedly told about what happened by geologist Dmitry Azakov, who was presented in the article as a world-famous scientist. According to him, as quoted by one of the newspapers of that time, the following happened. A terrifying creature with huge limbs flew out of the well. Seeing like wild wounded animals, the creature quickly rose high into the sky, then disappearing from sight. As learned communists, I do not believe in miracles and the Bible, but as an eyewitness to everything that happened, I am now forced to believe in hell. Needless to say, we were shocked to make such a discovery, but we know what we heard, and we know what we saw. This is quite enough to make us absolutely sure that we were drilling through the gates of hell. The geologist says that most of the working engineers who witnessed the mysterious phenomenon were frightened and ran away from the well. Those who remained had to undergo no less a test. We lowered a microphone into the well, designed to record the movement of lithospheric plates, but instead we heard a loud human voice, which sounded pain. At first we thought that the sound was probably coming from the drilling equipment, but when we checked it carefully, our worst suspicions were confirmed. The screams did not come from just one person, they were the screams and moans of millions of people. Official sources claim that the geologist Azakov, on whose authorship the sensation was based, apparently never existed. In any case, numerous attempts by journalists to find this person did not lead to anything, indicating that the story about the devils is fiction and the recording is a fake. The head of the sensational project, academician David Guberman, who, by his own admission, is still tormented by questions about supernatural sounds emanating from underground, spoke repeatedly. He says the article was published by the Finnish newspaper on April 1 and is nothing more than a hoax. However, already in 1980, followers of sects began to appear in Finland and America, who believed that the Russians had dug to hell and released Satan himself from there and that now an apocalypse was coming to Earth. The emphasis was placed on the fact that the project began to stall at the fateful 13th kilometer, and that is where the gate to hell is located. Sectarians came on television and shouted that they had found the road to hell in the Soviet Union. But there is other evidence of the mystical events that took place on the Kola Peninsula, received directly from an engineer who worked at the well for many years. On this project, he met a young man named Andrei, a seismologist from Chelyabinsk. Andrei had a young wife, whom he missed madly. They got married literally 6 months before he left for the Murmansk region. Since the work was carried out at a remote site on a rotational basis, it was possible to see the family no more than once every 3 to 4 months. In 1979, the target depth was completed, namely, they managed to break the American record of 9,583 meters. The Minister of Geology of the Soviet Union personally came with congratulations, gave out awards and prizes, and the entire scientific department received a month's leave. Andrei then went to see his wife in Chelyabinsk. However, Andrei returned from vacation depressed. It turned out that his wife began to have health problems, and her health was rapidly deteriorating. She was tormented by a dry cough and doctors diagnosed acute pulmonitis. Apparently her work in a paint shop at one of the metallurgical plants affected her health. Andrei tried to go to her more often, his colleagues helped him, covering him in front of his superiors. When the fabulous 12 kilometers mark was passed, Andrei received news about the death of his wife. The disease caused complications in her heart and she died in the intensive care unit at night. Grief crushed him, he withdrew into himself and hardly spoke to his colleagues. The real devilry began at 12,000 meters, At first the drilling rig experienced severe overheating, since the temperature at this depth was much higher than predicted. The well staff even joked darkly that they had drilled into the thick of it. Many employees began to complain of nightmares. André told everyone that they had drilled a well into hell and now the demons would break free. And what he also hears at night is his dead wife talking to him. The accident occurred on September 27, 1984, the drill string broke. Night shift employees said that when the drill was removed from the well, an ominous laugh was heard, and human shadows appeared along the walls of the drilling room. That same night, something took possession of André. At first he hid in the corner of his room and did not come out. When his colleagues came to him, he began to shout, and it seemed that in several different voices at once, André began to speak in an unknown language and laughed constantly. At that moment the room burst into flames. While the fire was being put out, André disappeared. He was found in the toilet of a neighboring apartment. When the door was broken down, he had already stopped breathing. Having strangled himself with a cable taken from the toilet tank, it was not possible to pump him out. Residents of the surrounding villages talked about strange shadows creeping along the walls and creepy voices that could be heard at night. They said that creepy inscriptions appeared in their houses in different languages. Some saw them in Russian. "Now I'm free." Whether it's a coincidence or not, soon after this accident one of the worst man-made disasters occurred, the explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Many experts believe that this event largely led to another catastrophe, already geopolitical, namely the collapse of the Soviet Union. Work on the Kola superdeep continued until 1990, when a maximum of 12,262 meters was reached. After several more accidents, we became convinced that we couldn't get deeper. All possibilities of modern technology have been exhausted. It seemed as if the Earth no longer wanted to reveal its secrets. Drilling stopped completely in 1992. Perhaps the Kola superdeep really became the embodiment of the myth of the Tower of Babel. Only perhaps this time we have reached not heaven, but hell. And retribution for human pride came, but we just didn't notice it. Or maybe this really is just someone's April Fool's joke. Whether you believe or not is up to you. What do you think is at the bottom of the Kola superdeep?